drink and something to eat, and it is a Friday night, so I won't take that. But who's brave enough to ask the first question? Thank you.
How much time would you normally expect to dedicate to your commitment?
It's very difficult to ask that question because of the range of boards. And it is actually one thing that's a very important question to ask, because it's what prevents people. There are some boards that are think tank boards, they meet twice a year. It might be a day of strategy. If it's a hospital board, the chances are to be a board meeting a month, then you'll be on a committee. If you're chairing it, you can times that by 3. University boards are about the same in terms of time. My charity board, Fight for Sight, was 4 meetings a year. I then sat on 2 committees in the end, but both of them started at 5 in the evening. So it was my choice as to how I do it. So it just varies. If it's a FTSE board, it's a whole different ball game. And in fact, when you do performance and conformance, it's just conformance. Really difficult. And watch, you can fire the chief executive, which can be fun from time to time, and set the Remco, that's a nightmare. But it just varies. So I think when you're looking at things, you have to ask the question. What I would do is everywhere you go, and I mean, my favourite slide in our workshop's a coffee cup, and it says, does anyone know that you're interested in a board position? Because most of them go by word of mouth. So when you meet people, you say, I just want to funny talk about boards. Are you on any boards? Yeah. Well, what does that do then? How many committees? What time? And how does it work? And so when you look at our vacancy board, that's why we have the vacancy board, to make it transparent. You click in, and it ought to say the time commitment. I mean, whatever they say, double it, because I'll be lying. And they're not paying you anyway, so they're really going to, But just ask, but you just don't know. I mean, JP Morgan brought us in. Anybody work for one of these big financial services in Canary Wharf? They have 33 subsidiary boards across the UK. 33! They have no diversity on any of them. And no independence, because ex-JP Morgan employees don't count, according to the Bank of England. I mean, it was quite a good point. And so those boards, an internal subsidiary board, they don't often meet that much, because it's mostly about sort of box ticking and filing. But if you get on one of those boards, so who do you work for? Who do you work for? Is there a pension fund in your organisation? Because you have to have 3 employee representatives. What a great gig to get on. Now, Lloyd's TSB, the Coal Miners Pension Fund and all these boards, they have independent non-executives. Well, if you've been on the internal one for Shell, and it's an election process, a bit of a campaign, now given nobody knows about it, and nobody campaigns, you've got a really good chance of getting it. So all of these boards, it's not just those boards, but who knows? But ask, which is what you did today, but ask in terms of the difficult sectors. Another question? Thank you.
So in terms of, on one side, experience and learning, and on the other, contributing, what I'm hearing is that it's better off that corporate boards are not only more time consuming, but not as enriching as an experience, if that's what you're looking for in terms of contribution, but also in terms of learning. Am I reading you right on that?
I mean, but obviously, when you say corporate boards, we've got unlisted boards.
Yeah.
You've got startup boards, so you can't make these things up. I'm involved with a startup called Hanks at the moment, which is condoms. I mean, who would have thought? Who would have thought I was involved in that? And what that is it's looking at the branding of condoms and taking it so women can buy condoms in little white envelopes and they can be posted to them. They've just launched in Boots. They've raised £1 million. So that's a corporate board. So it just varies so much. I mean, I'm talking the FTSE 100 boards of Shell and all those. Can you just imagine? Yeah. Now, clearly they will be looking at strategy. It's mostly the executive team that are doing that, and they're getting it ratified by the board. So the variation is so difficult. So I think it's about what your skill set is and what your experience. Most FTSE-type corporate boards, there's no way you're going to get on it unless you've already been a chief exec, chief financier, actually on a listed board. So you understand mergers, acquisitions, takeovers, shareholders, and I'm talking listed shareholders, which are different to private shareholders. So if you don't meet that obvious criteria, and they've got to look outside the obvious criteria, because if they do, we'll only be recruiting men, because 80% of them are men anyway. At the night, so how do you change that? You've really got to have something unique. So if they have 40% of the business in Brazil, and you are from Brazil, and you happen to have a degree in X, Y, Z, and be very well connected, they might look at you. So they are widening the brief and changing. And I think it's horses for courses. I don't think you get paid enough from being on a FTSE type board, given the liabilities and the responsibilities, but you don't get paid anything for being on the rest of them. So it's about whether you care, and I think good board directors, because we've got term limits and codes of conduct, and my God, if you don't follow the code of conduct, the light's right on you. That's why I like gender pay gap reporting, but that's another story. And that one, it's just changing. It's changing. Better. Thank you.
On the subject of payment, the talk's been fantastic, and I'm definitely thinking about trying to get that board position. But at the moment, I have a startup.
Yeah.
Not as lucrative as a condom startup, by the sounds of it.
They're not making any money.
Okay. It's a
startup.
It's a startup. It's a wine startup,
right.
and specifically, I sell half bottles of wine.
Yeah.
And I have a client who is wonderful, and she approached me recently and she said, I love what you're doing, I want to be on your board. And I said, I don't have a board, it's just me at the moment. And she said, well, don't you want to grow? And I said, yes. And she immediately has come back to me with a list of people that she thinks should be on my advisory board. And at which point I felt completely out of my depth, because I didn't know there was a difference between an advisory board, an executive board, and a non-executive board.
Yeah.
She says that it doesn't need to be remunerated. At which point I thought, oh gosh, what does she? I mean, she's lovely. I don't doubt her.
She really likes your wine.
I think she just wants free wine.
Hanks have been going through exactly the same position.
Right.
You have got two executives who absolutely no idea how to run a business. One's a gynecologist, so she sort of gets it the air. The other one's an accountant from Goldman Sachs, but they've never actually run a business. There are only 3 employees. If you look at their advisory board and their new board, talk about governance overkill. There's like all these people up here and nobody down here. But what we're trying to do is say, okay, there is knowledge of how to scale up a business. There's knowledge of a risk register. There's knowledge of insurance. There's knowledge of HR policies. Because what entrepreneurs do, they're so busy running the business and running this way, they forget the fact that it's quite a good idea to have what's called an employment contract to a new employee, and the next minute something's gone badly wrong because they haven't done X, Y, and Z. And that's what gets most entrepreneurs. It's not always the idea, it's the fact they actually don't know how to scale it. So what she's saying to you is, I think we can help scale it, but you shouldn't let somebody else dominate the advisory board. And then the question of, you don't want to be always reporting. So I think if you're setting up an advisory board, you'll say, what do I need? And I might not have a meeting of the advisory board all crapping on and confusing the bits. I might just say, if I'm doing X, I will go and ask that person a question. If I'm doing X, I'll go and ask that person a question. And we have had more people throwing themselves at Hanks wanting to advise, because they just love these 2 women. They love the concept. And actually the entrepreneurs are going, just like you. That's how they feel. So it's about getting it right. And it's the question is, do you want to stay with what you're doing? Is it a lifestyle business? Or do you actually want to take it somewhere? If you want to take it somewhere, you might need a few extra skills.
And the payment issue, is it as simple as FTSE direct?
Charity boards get you paid nothing. It's illegal to do it. NHS boards pay like a day rate of 500 quid or something, and it's lots of meetings. It's way not enough for what they do. University boards, Northumberland might be the first one that pays.
Northumbria does pay. Fortunately, I'm on Northumbria's board.
I did know that. That's why I'm looking.
No, that's very unusual. But actually, they're starting to think about it now, and payment is very, very interesting. And on the whole, education and higher education doesn't.
And the reason they don't pay is they've actually got to change their constitution because they're charities. Or they're set up by a royal charter. So most don't pay. So that's why people are happy to advisory board do things. So all the advice I've been giving to Hanks, and I'm the chair of the Remuneration and Nominations Committee, which doesn't mean anything at all because it looks great on my CV. It looks fantastic. And I'm not getting paid for that. But their new board, they're probably going to get sweat equity for their time. So it's worth nothing, but if it did and I've given time, that's quite a nice risk reward. Or they're paying like £6,000. And those individuals chairing it might be doing more than spending time on a FTSE, because it's much needier.
Yeah.
So who knows? But if you like them and they're prepared to help, But just take your own time, because what I'm doing with the house founders is saying, you don't have to do any of this. But by the way, you might want to do something, because there's something called boots, and they're quite a big count, and it won't last very long unless you do it properly. There's something called inventory, stock taking. It's a good idea. They don't know, because you can have an idea, but you can't activate it. So I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this probably is quite a naive question, but what different types of boards are there? Because you have the boards within your company,
Yeah.
where you're paid in your job and you're on that board. What other boards are there then? Because there's advisory and
Well, there's a trustee. A trustee is the same as being on a board. You're registered at the Charities Commission. You might also be registered at Companies House, because lots of charities have dual reporting and dual governance. And so when I meet somebody and say, "Are you on a board?" They'll go, "No, I'm just a trustee. I'm just a governor." And it's exactly the same. You have all the same accountabilities, and some housing associations, for example, whether it's your block of flats or a big Peabody housing association, some of them are bigger than FTSE 350 companies, FTSE 100 companies. So it's about what you want to do in terms of your time, but be very, very clear that they are a board. So to me, on an advisory board, to me it's more like a status thing, or you care in different ways. There's industry associations, so you've got the CBI, you could be on that board. You could be on the CBI Newcastle board that I'm currently dealing with. And I went to their office the other day, there's one person in a cab, as far as I could see it, it was tiny. And they've got a whole advisory board that's bigger than their office. But that's because it's about stakeholders. But as you're doing this, what you're learning is influence. You're learning collective decisions, and this is why it's so good for your career. So if you either do it because you care, you want to, even if you don't get paid anything, or you do it because it's a strategic move. You know, I've got a fantastic story of a lady at Credit Suisse. She was at UBS when we met her, and she went on to the board of Volleyball England just around the time of the Olympics. So she had all postgrad parades tickets. She was banding around the office. I'm on board, I'm on board, I'm on board. Oh my God, utterly transformed her career. Number one, she was going to Loughborough for a board meeting. She's actually got too executive too quickly. She had to rein herself back. She got too excited. But what happened is she had 2 children, and she was getting not promotions, because obviously she wasn't in it. She couldn't be, because she's and also people want to protect you. Oh, poor, it must be so hard for her. So she's going, well, it's fine actually. So by having that board, suddenly the entire UBS knew who she was. And she gave those tickets out, and she handed them to really senior executives to make a point. Fabulous. Not surprising, Credit Suisse poached her quite quickly, and now she's a managing director, one of the youngest they've got. That was an absolutely conscious strategy. But now she's got the chance, even though she's not necessarily FTSE, i.e. she's not, I mean, because even if you're on the board of Credit Suisse, nobody cares. Oh, it's not a proper Swiss board, is it? Like, it's just an internal thing that reports in. Go, no, but it's got the regulator, Financial Conduct Authority and everything. But she's got more of a chance on the portfolio than any of the other people coming out of all those Canary Wharf. Because what I say to them in our workshop when we say, can you do your elevator pitch? I said, you are no one. Oh no, but I'm this, that and the other. I said, there's 10,000 of you in Canary Wharf. They're all called managing directors. Doesn't mean anything. So all of those things are relevant. I probably think one last question, and we probably should have a drink.
Do you have any tips for moving from a board where you aren't paid to moving to one where you are paid, and any experience that you might need to gather along the way?
One of the things that's interesting about when boards are paid, they tend to get more CVs, and you are really pushing against people who are very top in big organisations, pushing for them. So the key thing is you've got to have a really good CV. You've then got to be on a paid board. What's interesting is if you think about the recruitment process for interns and graduates, they have to go through a lot of hoops. But when you apply to, say, a top public appointment, it might be an environmental agency, they often have they take names off CVs. It's a skills-based audit. These are the skills we're looking for. What skills do you have, and can you demonstrate what you've done and how you've applied those skills? So it's actually getting really good at selling yourself. So every now and again, and I've got one of our members who's on she's on the Brexit Advisory Committee. She worked for RBS, and she was several ranks down, but she put in a superb application, and then she interviewed better than all the other candidates, and she got it. I'll tell you what it was actually, no, what was it? It's Karen Harris, she might have been Lloyds Bank, I can't remember. But she that was a career differential. But she got the skills audit right. She got the sales pitch right. She also got the fit right in terms of her interview. So there's no obvious answer to that. I meet people who I really think should get paid positions, but they may be slightly going too high for them. Sophie O'Connor, we met her, she was on a housing association board. She then went on to a subsidiary board of a bank. She didn't try and go straight for the top listed things. Then she went on to a Bupa internal board. Now she's chairing Scottish Widows. So she's not yet FTSE. Because Scottish Widows is owned by Lloyds Bank. But where is our next move? So when you start wanting to move, some people think, I want to go here and I want to be here right now. Well, maybe, you might be lucky, or maybe you might need to take a few steps. And most of our members, if we do anything really well, is we'll give what's called telephone hugs. Jenny, oh, for goodness sake. I have been for 3 interviews over the last 2 years. I've got down to the last 2 for all 3, and I got rejected. The last one I really cared about. And that's me. How dare they? I mean, I'm a governance expert. I've been to INSEAD and everything. But that's not the point. The other person being interviewed did a better job and was actually a higher level than me on the day. So my background gets me to the interview, but I haven't nailed it. So actually what I'm going to do, because this was a FTSE 250, albeit a JP Morgan Investment Trust, so it doesn't really count as a business, if you know what I mean. I need to pare myself down a bit. I have delusions of grandeur, it's not quite there yet. So it's difficult. I don't think I've fully answered your question, but it really isn't that simple.
I've got a question I think
Go on then.
I'd really like to hear your opinion. So last Christmas I heard a new term, glass cliff, which is where women are doing what you're advising, which is going for opportunities and then getting them because the blokes know that it's poison chalice and to avoid it. And then, I mean, glass cliff means a number of things, as well as getting a terrible situation, turning it around, and as soon as they've turned it around,
so there's there is a huge amount of research on this. If you are a big...
sorry, my question was, how do you spot a toxic opportunity?
Okay, so first, who knows whether you could actually turn it around? So for example, if you are a big global company, it's usually safer to recruit the person internally. Because most people in a change situation, in a glass cliff situation, we're going bust, we're not going bust, it's change strategy, most executives fail. Those executives who don't know the existing infrastructure internally and how to get round it have an increased risk of failure. And if the company who's bringing them in, and the research is very clear on this, doesn't onboard them, and it's the same if you join, a school governing board. If they don't look after them and get them up to speed, they increase the chance of that person failing. Now, if we decided there's no one in our organisation to do this, there's nobody in the department, suddenly you're prepared to take a risk on somebody you don't know, because you don't know anybody that can do it. So suddenly, occasionally the woman gets it. Well, sod it! We'll just give it to her. And so it is true in a turnaround situation. I think it's true in turnaround for male or female, but you do find that women are often given a position. I mean, one could argue that was Theresa May's situation. No, I shouldn't have gone on to politics. Shouldn't have gone there. But that is true. So one of the things that we do as an organisation is we have a leadership course called Getting to the C-Suite. And what we do is we say, okay, what do Harvard and INSEAD say are the most important things to actually do things well? Most people who do things well, they need to understand what strategic thinking is. Because strategic thinking and the process of strategic thinking is completely different than implementation. So number one, if you go for an interview for a stretch position, you have to land that better. And we, on that module, we actually do what's the interview question. And we do strategic thinking in a morning, like it's just not possible. So we assume the executives already know what it is, but they need to feel more confident about it. Because when you're there and everybody's gunning for you, well, she shouldn't have got there. She shouldn't have got there because she's a woman anyway. I mean, really. It's much harder for you, and you have to be hugely self-confident. So one way of saying you have the right tools, here's the toolkit. But actually, as an organisation, because you've been on the C-suite programme, and we've only put 60 through it, and we've priced it where people can pay themselves, we said we will be your support structure. So the professor who runs it, Professor Malcolm Gregor and Julie Ashworth, and the whole Women on Boards Network, we say, right, just ring us. When you feel vulnerable, ring us. That's why big organisations are spending a lot of money on coaches and mentors, and actually most chief execs don't admit it, but most chief execs of big companies do have a mentor, because it's hard being lonely. So the question is, if you're that newbie, stretched into a position that even you're not quite sure you're going to get, do you say, oh, could I have a mentor? There's so much to it. So I haven't answered your question, but there's absolutely true, there is that glass cliff. And there's also, from the Cranfield research that's just come out of the FTSE 350, they've said that those women who are the single woman going on to those boards, they're only staying one term. Why is that? Is it because they hate it? Is it because the restructuring, they're the first off? There's something going on there. And that's the same thing as your glass cliff. And that's why, when this is my business about, girls' schools and boys' schools, we absolutely know that girls' schools do more physics, they do more coding, they do more this, so why wouldn't you want to send your girl to a school like that? But there's no evidence that when they get into industry, of course there's examples, she went to a girls' school, she went to a girls' school, these just random things, which are, but we do need to make sure that when the girls get there, they're supported. And I think lots of big companies are thinking about how to support a minority and don't leave them so vulnerable.